And there are things that you'll have to figure out or areas where you might feel uncomfortable, but you might realize that those are things you're actually really good at, and you never would have known it if you had stayed in your comfort zone as an employee of someone else.
Hey there, I'm Goli Kalkaran, and this is Lessons from a Quitter, where we believe that it's never too late to start over. No matter how much time or money you've spent getting to where you are, if ultimately you are not happy, then it's time to get out. If you're feeling stuck and you feel like there's gotta be more, there's gotta be a way to feel fulfilled and excited about what you do, then this is the podcast for you. Each week, I will sit down with an inspiring guest who quit their professional career in order to forge their own path and create a life that they love. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Lessons from a Quitter. I'm so happy to have you back. If you feel like you need some help with your own jump, if you need some motivation or some tricks to help with mindset shifts, I send out a weekly email that typically has inspirational videos or articles that can kind of help with this journey of starting something new. So if you're interested in that, go to the website lessonsfromaquitter.com and sign up. Or you can always find me at Instagram at lessonsfromaquitter and send me a DM. Let me know you listen to the podcast. I love hearing from you guys. I'm really excited about the show today with Nicole Osmer. It's a little bit different than our typical stories because this show typically has people that quit one career and start something completely different. But I want to show that that doesn't have to be the case. There's a lot of people that don't necessarily hate what they're doing. They might just not like the way in which they are doing it. Maybe your current job or the current way that career doesn't allow enough flexibility or time or, money, whatever it is. And we feel like a lot of times it's just the way it is. This is the way the profession has always been. But I think now more than ever, we're seeing these disruptions in every industry. And with the internet, there's so many ways of doing things differently that now is really the time to kind of think outside the box and see how you can maybe create something for yourself that's different and that really fits your needs. And that's why Nicole's story was so interesting to me, and I really wanted to highlight it on the podcast. Nicole started out in PR at a large medical device company, and she was doing healthcare PR. And she'll talk about how she got to that position, but she found herself in this niche, and she was there for about 5 years. And when a larger pharmaceutical company bought her company, her part-time status was no longer available. And she had 2 young kids at home. And she'll talk about how she didn't want to go back full-time. And so what she decided to do was to go out on her own as a freelance PR person in the niche of healthcare PR. And in 2007, that was kind of the beginning of freelancing. There wasn't a lot. It wasn't the infrastructure that's in place now that there's so many freelancers. So to take that leap and to say that you're going to do it on your own takes a lot of courage. And she started doing well, right off the bat. And she created a career where she made more money. And she'll talk about some key strategies that she implemented that really helped her succeed. And she got to stay, at home as much as she wanted with her kids. And that freelancing gig has turned into this incredible PR agency with 20 employees that has 2 offices in San Francisco and in Orange County. What she's done is incredible. She's now a founding member of MedTech Women, a nonprofit organization dedicated to highlighting women leaders in the medical technology industry. She was named 2015 PR Executive of the Year by a Business Intelligence Group. She's gone on to do some wonderful things, and I think her story is just a great example of what you can do if you're willing to kind of take that leap of faith and figure out another way. So without further ado, let's jump in and talk to Nicole. Hi, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It's so great to be here.
I really want to jump in and talk about your career and the transitions that you've made. So to give people a little bit of background, we're going to talk a lot about your career in PR, but can you tell us a little bit how you got into PR and, how that journey kind of looked for you?
I actually didn't know anything about public relations. My major in college was art history. And after college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but a lot of people had moved to New York City, and a friend of mine worked for agent for photographers, and one of his photographers needed a studio coordinator. And so I moved to New York, got that job, and I love living in New York. But the job, there wasn't really a lot of growth. I was, doing some things to help with photo shoots for advertising. Then had the opportunity with one of the agencies that we worked with closely, a branding agency, was going to be opening an office in San Francisco. And they were willing to relocate me, and I have some family in California. So that's how I really fell into PR. The director of public relations for that agency went on maternity leave, and I was at a point where they were kind of allowing me to do whatever I wanted at an entry level. And I enjoyed the variety and just the ability to sort of think creatively about how to get the word out for this branding agency, but I didn't really have anyone to learn from. So I then went to a public relations agency. This is in the late 90s, so very focused on technology, internet companies. Then went in-house at an internet company. And then that entire sort of, back then it was the .com world, started imploding, and companies were no longer able to go public, and all the stocks started dropping. And so I ended up working in-house at a company in healthcare called Guidant, and started doing public relations in the medical device field, which I never intended to be in business or anything in medicine. So it was, sort of surprised that that's what I ended up doing, but I really loved it. And it's been a great career for me ever since.
Well, we'll get into that career. And I think that's what a lot of people do is, we talk about it in a lot of the interviews where it's like one thing kind of leads you to the next, and it's another opportunity. And a lot of times it ends you up somewhere that you had no idea you were going to be. So you end up at Guidance, and you're there for a number of years. And I really kind of want to focus on your transition out of that. So Guidance is a really large organization. And so you said that you really enjoyed it. And so was there a time that you were starting to think that like you didn't want to be in, either the corporate world or kind of a big organization, or what was the impetus for you wanting to leave that?
It's interesting because I was there for a total of 5 years. And the last year, our company had been acquired by an even larger company. So Guidant was acquired by Abbott, a huge pharmaceutical company. I did not, during that time, did not really think about what I was going to do next. And I really wasn't very strategic about it. And this is before LinkedIn. This is in like the early 2000s. I didn't really make an effort to network with people, but actually in retrospect, I could have done more. It actually didn't end up hurting me in any capacity, but now I encourage people, to connect with people on LinkedIn and kind of realize that the people you're meeting early in your career can have a big impact later on down the road. Because now, nearly 20 years later, a lot of the same people that I worked with at that company are now my clients, or, partners or potential future clients, or people that I work with on a consulting basis or whatever. So that was a really great place to meet people. I just was sort of heads down doing my job. I had young kids. My first daughter was born in 2003. So I was a couple years into the job at that point. They allowed me to work part-time after my second daughter, and I enjoyed it. It was challenging, and I was learning a lot, and it was an interesting place to work. Just in terms of experience, was very good for public relations. We were sadly investigated by the Department of Justice for an issue with one of our devices. We had some product recalls. We were almost acquired by J&J, and that fell through. We had, layoffs and lots of nice crisis communications training, as well as some really positive, product launches and things like that were pretty high profile. So it was really, really great experience. I have always put my family and kind of my life before work. And when it was clear I was not going to be able to continue to work part-time, that's when I really started thinking, okay, I've been doing it at that point for nearly 5 years. I had the security of my husband had a good job. We had a manageable mortgage. It wasn't like I had to keep really pushing myself to climb the corporate ladder. And I recognized the value of what I was doing when this bigger company acquired my company, because they paid public relations agencies so much money to do what I had been doing myself for years and very efficiently and well. And it really opened my eyes to the value of what I knew how to do. And at that point, I started thinking, I could probably do this, but not as an employee, because there's a lot of smaller companies out there that needed those skills, that couldn't afford a full-time person. And especially in public relations, same with law. Not every company of every size needs, an in-house person that specializes in that. But there's a lot of opportunity to work with many, many other companies that maybe don't need a big public relations firm or don't need a big law firm, but just need a very specialized, skilled person that understands their industry. And the thing that was so great for me that I didn't even realize at the time was I was really getting to know this niche that is actually a very big industry and not that many people that have the experience, especially in-house. There's a lot of people in public relations from agencies that work with these companies, but there aren't too many people that have that in-house experience that then go and make themselves available to the world. So I was pretty successful as a freelancer right away when I decided to leave.
When you did this, it was still like mid-2000s?
I left in 2007.
Okay, so 2007. At that time, there isn't freelance economy that there is today, and all the infrastructure and all the how-tos and all the guides and whatever. So how you were going to get customers or how you were going to work as a freelancer? Like, did you have any examples or did you know what you were going to do?
I asked one person who had gone to a startup, if I were available, would you potentially hire me? Do you think anyone would hire me? And he was encouraging and he said, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would hire you. And I'm sure other people would as well. When I had gone on, I think my second maternity leave, I had interviewed people who were consultants to potentially replace me for a few months. So I knew people did it. And I kind of knew what was out there from having interviewed people. And I knew the kind of hourly rates they were charging and kind of what the experience was. It was actually good market research, even what I was trying to do. I just really needed someone to come in and help out while I was out of the office for a few months. There was a small business organization. It's called Silicon Valley Score. Mm-hmm. And I went to a couple workshops that they put on about basically how to work for yourself. That it was for small businesses. What is the sole proprietorship? How does that all work with a 1099 or, all of that? And so I understood the basics around that. And it's not that complicated. I mean, it really is not that complicated. You have to figure out what you're going to charge. And the legal stuff is actually very, very simple. Anyone can be a sole proprietorship just with their social security number. I didn't even have an employer identification number. I wasn't an LLC. I didn't overcomplicate it. I just started letting people know I was available, and I charged a pretty high hourly rate. I mean, again, having seen what my company would pay an agency to do, and not very well, there was a $10,000 minimum we were supposed to be asking the marketing people for to do a press release. And then the agencies would write the release and I would get it and think gosh, this is not very good. I have to rewrite the whole thing. They don't really understand our business. And it took forever to get it. I could have done this in a day. What I can do in a day is worth $10,000. Really? That's awesome. I'll charge less than that. So it was sort of really understanding my value and also understanding the market, that there weren't that many people that had that specialization in healthcare, even less that had a specialization in medical devices, especially in Silicon Valley.
Right.
There's a lot of people working in tech, and there's actually tons of medical device companies, but not a lot of people that have healthcare PR experience. And then also I wanted to give myself a raise. I knew that I was good at what I did, and I wanted to be able to work less and make the same money. And I did that easily. I think I worked about 20 hours a week and brought in the same amount of money right away.
That's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, it took a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Then once you do something well a couple times, the word spreads quickly.
Right. I love so many things about this. I think that what you mentioned earlier about lawyers and PR agents and stuff, obviously a lot of people realize that there is a need for companies, just highly specialized people, do a couple of things for them. And I think a lot of people, when I was a lawyer, and I know a lot of lawyers know how much like the firms bill them out at, and they're not making that.
Yeah.
So like it is a good teachable moment to see like what your value is worth. But the jump between that and saying like, oh, hey, I'm worth that and I'm going to go kind of command more takes a lot of self-confidence. And I don't know, there's a mental shift. I think it's incredible that you did that, because I think for the most part, people get stuck in, oh, but like they're this big company and they have this name and this brand and they can command that. And like, I can't. Who am I to charge that much? Did you ever feel fear before you were going to jump that, how would I get these clients? Like, it's easy for someone to say like, yeah, I would hire you, but then not actually do it. You know, it's sometimes people want to be nice when you ask them something like that. So like, were you ever fearful that like, I'm going to do this and people aren't going to pay this high rate that I'm asking?
I don't think I was very fearful because I did get some work right away. In fact, my company, Abbott, hired me right off the bat to be a consultant for them to help them do a RFP for a new PR agency. So that was a great project. And I was able to work on an hourly rate for them. And I do have to say about the rate that you set, I didn't realize it at the time, but when I got into a master service agreement with Abbott, there is no negotiating that rate.
Right.
Like, it is the rate you're going to get forever.
Oh,
and
okay.
They will give you, I think it's like maybe a 4% increase per year or something like that, which is really nothing. So it's really good that I started out at a pretty high rate. I actually started out at $190 an hour.
Wow.
Then I raised it after a couple of years. And some clients would negotiate me down a little bit because they were startups. And in some cases, if I really wanted to take the work, I would do that. But when you think about the value that you provide as an independent freelancer, it's enormous. And it's actually, in some ways, you could argue you should charge more than bigger organization because they are getting very senior level counsel 100% of the time. If you're really good at what you do and you've been a like relatively senior person, and at the time I only had 5 years of medtech experience and I had additional PR experience, and they don't have a commitment. There's no retainer. I would never charge a monthly minimum. And that's so attractive because when you look at the alternative for them to hire a PR agency that has usually the same rates or higher, but also they have a minimum. So you have to pay, you know, they don't want to take you on as a client unless you're going to be giving them a $10,000 a month, usually. Sometimes it's even more minimum engagement. And for startups, I think there's really a sweet spot where they need that expertise and they're willing to pay for it, but they don't need it. They don't need it like long-term, year-long contract at $10,000 a month.
Right.
They sort of just need it when they need it. And I think that was always a benefit to my clients that I would say, listen, when it's really busy, I'm going to charge you a decent hourly rate. And when it's quiet, you don't pay for anything. That's really good for them. And they appreciate that.
Yeah. And I think that what you raised, though, is so important because so often we focus on what we lack or what we can't offer. And we compare ourselves, you know, a bigger company and think of like, well, they have all these other resources or they have X, Y, and Z. And we don't focus on all of the benefits that you can bring that they can't, you know, like what your value proposition is. And I think it's incredibly smart for you to have focused on that and realize that value because I think we tend to undersell ourselves. And so I would love your thoughts on, you just said that you started at a very high hourly rate and raised it. And we've actually heard on the podcast, a lot of people that when they're starting out, and maybe it depends on the level that you're starting out, right? If you're starting something completely new and you want to start in a new field, it might be different. But a lot of people start with the mentality of like, I'm going to work for free. I'm going to hustle. I'm going to find people and show that I'm good. And then the word of mouth will spread. And that clearly isn't the path you took. So like, do you have thoughts on people doing it that way?
Well, I think one danger is that it's hard to raise your prices. It just isn't a comfortable conversation, especially by a big amount. And I think if you do a really great job, the word that's going to spread is, wow, she's cheap and she does an amazing job.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then people are going to like that. And that becomes a part of your brand. I think for me, it was I was more interested in getting less work but at a higher hourly rate because I was sort of fine with that because my time was precious. I had little kids at home. I didn't really want to be working full time. I didn't want to be included in boring meetings that really weren't relevant to me anymore. I had done plenty of that in, corporate America.
Right.
And I just wanted to be very efficient. I didn't want to make it too easy for people to use a lot of my time.
Right.
So I think it depends on your level of experience. If you want to be doing something, and there were things that I did. I started doing some paid social media at a rate that was a little bit lower where I'd just break even, but I wanted the experience. Or in some cases, I've taken clients that had pretty small budgets, but really innovative, amazing products. I really just wanted to work with them. You have to decide when it's worth it for you to do that.
Yeah.
Or if it's a long-term thing that, is going to be really like the client and, they don't have a very big budget, but, there's some sort of security and volume there where it makes sense to bring down your rate. I think that's okay too. But I think you really do need to know the market. We all have competitors. And if other people are doing what you can do for a much lower rate and you don't really bring any additional value, I do think that's going to be hard to get and keep work. But I think for me and for anyone, there's the quote about there's riches and niches. I think that's really true. And that's why I'm so excited when I'm hiring people to tell them, like, I didn't know I wanted to go into healthcare. It didn't sound very exciting to me, but actually it's really amazing working with these innovators, these entrepreneurs doing really, really hard things that may or may not ever be successful. And it takes a long time. And you're getting the specialization in something that's really valuable to the world. And it's going to be a great career. If you know how to do something really well that very few people understand in a regulated environment like healthcare, finance, things like that, those opportunities are always there. So you have to be really good though. And I did invest, I've paid for my own way to go to social media marketing conferences. I read books all the time. I really do invest in myself because I want to be great at what I do. If you just want to charge a high rate, but don't really push yourself to be excellent at what you do, people will see through that and they won't think you're worth it and you won't be able to command it.
Right. And so let's talk a little bit about the agency you've built, because we've had some people that have gone on to be freelancers and have made really great livings and have created some support staff or some small teams to help them do their own thing. But what you did was create actually a pretty large agency. So can you tell us a little bit about what your company now looks like how many team members you have, things like that?
So we have about 20 employees.
Incredible.
Yeah. And that's just in the past couple of years. After about 8 years of freelancing, I started getting really, really busy and having so many amazing opportunities come my way with just really innovative, great companies and really amazing entrepreneurs. And I did not want to say no. I just, really wanted to take this work because it was interesting and I enjoy it. And after I think you hire your first employee, it gets a lot easier. You kind of see okay, this is not going to break me. I'm actually going to make more money by doing this, not less. Yes, it's an investment. I need to have a space for us to work together. And then, we realized, okay, well, now we sort of need another junior person because we are getting a bigger volume of work. So then we hired our second employee. And then it just sort of snowballs from there, where you realize that in order to fulfill the work that you need to do, you've got to hire more people.
Right.
I think having one or two really amazing clients that were willing to spend money with us and invest in public relations and try new things, including paid social media work we were doing for them, really helped me because that gave me the capital to hire people.
Right.
Because they were willing to spend a lot of money on PR. And it has worked in their favor. They were acquired for $1 billion and they, really credited. I mean, maybe it's just our marketing contact, but he really gave us a lot of credit for their success because we were able to get them a lot of publicity out and help educate patients and doctors about what they were doing. And that really did allow us to grow, but it took some time to get there.
Right.
I mean, I guess 8 years in before I hired anyone. And then soon after that, I decided to rebrand. As a freelancer, I didn't want to be an agency, sort of pretending to be an agency when I was really just one person. I just feel like that's a little bit I wanted to be very transparent.
Right.
Like, it's just me. I'm not trying to be anything bigger or different. And so when we branded to Health and Commerce, the name that we have now, that was really due to the fact that, I was realizing this might be something we could potentially sell someday. And I don't really want my name on the door because I don't want everyone to want to work with me.
Right.
That's not the idea. The idea was I wanted my team to be able to do the work and get the credit and bring in clients and not have people say, oh, look, where's Nicole?
Right.
Which happens when your name is on the door. So I think that was strategic decision that I think was a good decision.
Yeah. Well, that's incredible. And I think it just speaks to the fact that like a lot of this stuff, people want to have everything figured out and it's just not the way it works. And I think it's, you do it as it goes along. And like, obviously you wouldn't know that it's going to become like this, but who knows when you start something like what it's going to be in 8 or 10 years. And so the fact that it has become so successful and grown into such large team and agency is incredible.
Yeah, I think I love the quote that says the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And the second best time is today.
Right.
Because, just looking back, I never would have predicted. In fact, I always said I don't want to have an agency. It's interesting to me that the things that I thought I would like the least, I'm actually really liking a lot. I didn't really want to be in sales, for example. And as a freelancer, you have to sell yourself. And I realized I love new business meetings. I love that process of getting to know problems and figuring out if we can solve them and just having those conversations with people. And then I thought, well, I never want to have an agency. I don't really want to manage people. I don't want to, that just wasn't, I just want to do the work. Right. And now I love it because it pushes me to try new things and to really be able to mentor people and help them. And we have such a great team. It's really a lot of fun to work with them. So I don't know what the next, few years will hold, but it's been a lot of fun to get to this point. And I would just encourage people to take the next logical step and not be afraid to take a leap.
That's awesome. And we should also note that in the midst of all of this too, you have 5 children now, right?
Yeah. We have 5 kids.
You deserve an award just for that. It's incredible.
And now I think I've been really lucky to have some really great babysitters and nannies.
Yeah.
We do treat our nannies very well because our success as a family depends on them. So we pay them well. We are flexible with them.
Right.
I think that's been really key. Even from the beginning when I was freelancing, even though I wasn't working full-time, I did have full-time childcare. So I could have the flexibility to be responsive to my clients.
That raises an interesting point because I think a lot of people feel guilty about doing things like that. Like they feel like if I'm not bringing in a certain amount of income or if I'm only working part-time, then I should be the one taking care of my kids. So how did you mentally get to the place where you realized you needed full-time care even though you weren't working full-time?
I just wanted to be very responsive. I wanted my clients to know that I really was working and that I wasn't just a stay-at-home mom now working on the side. I really didn't want kid noises in the background of phone calls and things like that. And I think in PR, you have to be available. It's like some big news story comes out or something, you have to be able to jump on the phone right away. I didn't need anyone to be there. I would just send the babysitter home.
Right.
And also, kids really like routines, and the nanny would take them to the park every afternoon, every morning, and then they'd go to the park, and then they'd come home and have lunch, and then they'd have a nap time and whatever. And it's just nice to sort of have that routine.
Right.
The other thing is we've always, and we do treat our nannies well, we've always had them help with household stuff too. So if I could be with the kids, then great. I would send them to the grocery store or I would have them do the laundry or organize the toys or, so many different things that they could do to help out. And yes, it was an investment. And I do think people have to be willing to invest in themselves and their businesses and realize you may not make a lot of money this month or even this year, but you're investing in something that is going to be your career for a long time. And if you completely let it break down because of a short-term issue with I just don't want to pay a nanny amount of hours if I don't need someone, it's kind of short-sighted.
Right.
And I also think, there were a lot of times when we'd go on vacation or be out of town or my parents would come into town and we would pay our nanny for a week anyway, because it's not her problem
Right.
that we're not going to be around. She needs to know how much money she's going to make. And out of fairness, again, it's sort of an investment. So I think my husband is the one who's helped me think of things in that way, because it wasn't really always my mindset, but he would always have sort of a long view on things like that and say, like, don't worry about, that's a short-term issue, but in the long term, it's the right thing to do.
Right.
And it's better to just spend the money now to create. And that really creates loyalty.
Yeah.
We never had a nanny leave us unless we moved or they moved or there was some,
Yeah. No, that's a great way of thinking about it. I mean, that's definitely the right way. I think that we just get so burdened by like society's standards. And I think so many mothers today have this unnecessary guilt about like having to do everything themselves. It really isn't possible. And so like you need that help, whether it's in the form of housework or childcare or whatnot. And I recently saw like business mentor I follow, and he was saying, I mean, the quote was, I can't hire someone because I can't afford it, but you can't afford it because you don't hire someone. It's the reality of it is that, like what you were saying, is sometimes you have to invest in that knowing that it will pay off dividends in the future. But a lot of us, because we're uncertain of what's going to happen in that future, like, am I really going to make that money? Is it going to work out? We stay in this kind of fear-based, like, well, I can't spend this money. And, obviously some people can't, like, don't have it, the extra income. And so but I see a lot of people that do have it and still don't invest in that because they feel guilty as like, well, I'm not bringing in a full-time salary, so I can't do this stuff. And I love that you had the foresight, or your husband had the foresight, to kind of like put that on you too, because that really gives you that baseline to be able to do the things you've done. Well, this has been super helpful. And I think a lot of people take a lot of things away from this. One of the reasons I really wanted you on this podcast is it's not the typical quitting story we have, because a lot of times people quit professions that they don't like and start something completely new, which hasn't been the case for you. But I think that actually what you have been saying really relates to a lot of people. They have a specialized knowledge. They like what they're doing. They just don't like the companies they work for or the current infrastructure that's in place for their types of jobs. And I think now more than ever, there's so much opportunity to do things differently, whether it's in law or accounting or teaching or whatever. And so is there any advice that you would have to somebody that's kind of like this, that realizes their value, that they can charge for a certain amount, but is just like stuck and afraid because that steady paycheck is a safety blanket for people and they don't know what to do?
I would say you just have to have a little bit of faith. It's all going to be okay. And whether that's confidence or just taking a long view of things, I mean, just think about how the word of mouth referrals are so vital, and people want to be able to refer someone to someone else who's really great. You're providing something of value. Like, I get referrals all the time, and I know people feel good about referring me to people because they know I'm going to do a good job, and it makes them look good because they're helping someone else solve a problem, and it's good for them from a, social capital perspective, that they're doing something good. So it might not be immediate. Your first year, maybe you'll make less money, but I guarantee in the long run, you're going to have more control, more freedom. I mean, we lived in Spain for a few months and I worked from Spain. I've been able to do the things that I want to do with my kids, go on their field trips, not have to ask anyone permission ever. I have to manage my schedule. And it is true that when you start working for yourself, you think you're going to be your own boss, and then you have 10 clients and you have 10 bosses. Right. That is sort of how it felt for me. Actually, I never had 10 from the beginning, but even like the most I could sort of handle on my own was 6. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, I have to think about 6 different things. So, but you do have a lot more control. And I think you just have to have that faith in yourself, faith in the economy, faith in that people will refer you, as long as you're really good at what you do. And there are things that you'll have to figure out, or areas where you might feel uncomfortable, but you might realize that those are things you're actually really good at. And you never would have known it if you had stayed in your comfort zone as an employee of someone else. So I would just say, go for it and charge as much as you can out of the gate, because that will enable you to later on hire a nanny for more hours than you need, hire subcontractors and still make money from them, because there's a margin there. If you hire other people and charge them out at a higher rate, then you start to make serious money. And I can say from a financial perspective, I have done so well working for myself, and that really all came together once I started being able to bring on more people to help me with projects. It's so much fun and I think so liberating. And you come up with all kinds of creative ideas for things you can do once no one else is sending you a paycheck.
Yeah, absolutely. And once that you've kind of make that jump and realize that fear was a little unfounded, and then it really opens you up to thinking of all the possibilities and everything else you can do. So I love that advice. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, Nicole. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I know that the audience is going to get a lot out of this.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
I loved talking to Nicole. I think she provides so much insight through her own journey. But here are my 3 takeaways. 1, know your worth. Know what value you offer so that you can price yourself accordingly and demand what you deserve. 2, you will never know where your decisions are actually going to lead. So stop trying to think 10 steps ahead. She would have never known that she was going to develop an agency with 20 people when she started out as a freelancer. You have to take that leap of faith and see where it takes you. And 3, invest in yourself. She talked about it both in terms of like conferences and education, but also with getting help with housework and nannies. Figure out what it is that you want to do with your life and put in the time and money to invest in the person that you need to become in order to get that done. I hope you loved that episode, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for listening. I can't tell you how much it means to me. If you liked the podcast, please rate and review us on iTunes. It'll help other people find the show. If you want to connect or reach out, follow along on Instagram and Facebook at Lessons from a Quitter, and on Twitter at Quitter Podcast. I would love to hear from you guys, and I'll see you on the next episode.